Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Book Review Blog. I am your book reviewer, and today we're going to review the book, The Dark Tower, the last book in the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. Like I said, this was the very last book in the Dark Tower series, and I'm excited that I was able to read all 7 books and review them. So let's get started. When we left book 6, Song of Susanna, Susanna Dean was at the Dixie Pig with a group of low men, is what they're called. They're actually vampires. And she was getting ready to give birth to her baby. And everybody was in different places. I believe Jake and Father Callahan were also outside the Dixie Pig, and they were ready to go in and save Susanna. And Roland and Eddie were elsewhere in another world doing other business. So, in the beginning of the Dark Tower, Susanna does have her baby, and it is not human exactly. It's a human spider-like creature that can easily shapeshift. And the baby's name is Mordred. Susanna didn't name it that, but that's what name it kind of assumed, and that's what everybody called it. So, and the first thing that Mordred does is eat the mother. It doesn't eat Susanna necessarily. Susanna has obtained another identity of Mia, and Mia is actually the one who is carrying this child all through its prenatal stuff, and so the baby eats Mia. And so, and at this point, Father Callahan and Jake have come into the room of the Dixie Pig, and the low men have realized that they're there, and a whole bunch of battles ensue. There's battles between Jake and Father Callahan and the low men, and what happens there is that Father Callahan realizes that he must sacrifice himself to these vampires, and he's used to doing that because he felt very connected to what he was like in Jerusalem's Lot. And so Jake is able to escape, and Susanna is also able to escape, fighting the low men that were in with her in the special delivery room, if you want to call it that. And Roland and Eddie again are elsewhere. And so somehow they get out of the Dixie Pig through a whole bunch of different twists and turns and other things like that, which I can't get into. But eventually they do go out, and then they reunite, and they go to Thunderclap. When there they meet a band called the Breakers, and these are people who are wanting to get rid of all of the beams statues that were around, and if the beams fall dead, the Dark Tower doesn't remain anymore. And so now part of Dark Tower 7, only 2 beams are left, the bear and the turtle. And so Roland and his clan have to really save this beam. And so there is a scuffle between the breaker men, and unfortunately Eddie dies in this one. And Susanna is, of course, very distraught because Eddie was her husband in all intents and purposes. And Roland and Jake are distraught, and everybody is, because one of their own has died. And even though they mourned for Father Callahan, Eddie was there from the beginning, so he was mourned way more. And what ends up happening is that Susanna stays with Eddie in Midworld to make sure that he has a proper burial, and Jake and Roland go to our world, and they go to Maine of 1999, because they have realized that in order to save themselves and to keep on with in search of the Dark Tower, they have to save Stephen King from getting hit by the van. This is very weird because Stephen King brings back his horrific accident and brings it into the story as a real life time. And it was very good to read that because he made himself a character, which I thought was cute. And so what ends up happening is that they end up saving Stephen King by getting him out of the way. I mean, he is hurt, basically, in the way that he was hurt in real life, but he wasn't killed. And, like, the end of book number 6 kind of entails that he is. And in the process of that, unfortunately, Jake dies. I believe Jake kind of gets in front of the van, and he is killed. And so now Roland has lost another one of his clan or quartet, and now Roland and Oi are very mournful of Jake because, again, even before Eddie and Susanna, Jake was with Roland in the very, very beginning. So Roland buries Jake, I should say, and this is kind of cute. He goes to where Stephen King is lying there, waiting for the paramedics to come, and he has a little conversation with Stephen King where basically he tells him to write his story. And Roland tells Stephen King to finish The Dark Tower. And that's what that Stephen King does. So now Roland and Oi go back to Midworld to be with Susanna. And by this time, Susanna's done burying Eddie, so now she's ready to move on. And so, again, Roland, Susanna, and Oi start walking towards the Dark Tower. And also, what's kind of happening in this book is you also follow the path of Mordred. Mordred starts off as an infant, and he can easily change from a human infant to a spider. And there is a moment in this book where Mordred meets the Man in Black. The Man in Black is still there, but he's not been in the picture for a couple of books. But Mordred does meet the Man in Black, and the Man in Black realizes that Mordred has a thing on his heel, on one of his legs, I guess, that will help. The Man in Black thinks will help get him to the Dark Tower. So he tries to manipulate Mordred to say, let me help you, together we'll defeat Roland, and all will be good. But Mordred sees past it, and he ends up killing the Man in Black. So, that was a little turn of events that I wasn't sure if that was going to happen, or what was going to end up with the Man in Black. So again, Roland, Susanna, and Oi keep walking, and they get to, it's kind of funny, in Midworld, there are seasons, and they kind of go from fall, and they go to winter, where there's a blizzard, in Midworld, and they find a town with a street, I don't remember what the town is called, but the street that they're on is called Odd Lane, and there they meet a man who I believe his name is Joe Collins. Anyway, Joe Collins is, if that's his name, let's just call him that. He is first a very nice man where he's like, oh my gosh, my friends, I will take you in and I will give you shelter from this blizzard. And I have, like, basically a Thanksgiving dinner, let's call it, up for you, and you know, you can sit a spell a bit, you know. So first Susanna and Roland are very happy about this, and they go in. And so Joe's like, well, I was a comedian in my old life, so I can entertain you. So, let me tell you some jokes. And it's funny because he tells, like, of like deadpan humor, or just kind of like if you were a human now, you'd kind of roll your eyes. But one of the funny things is that Roland thinks this is hysterical because he's never heard these before. And but in Susanna, like, initially, again, kind of rolls her eyes because she's heard this before, but she ends up laughing. And Susanna actually excuses herself to use the bathroom, and through the bathroom, she gets a message that Joe Collins is not the nice guy that they think he is. And so she ends up saving Roland from Joe Collins, because Joe is basically another vampire, and he, instead of like killing them with like sucking their blood, he's killing them through laughter. And Roland is like choking, like laughing so much that he's choking. And so they kill Joe Collins, and they think that's it, and they end up going to the basement of Joe's house, and in the basement they find that there's like a jail cell or a little cage where a young man is. And even though this man, I think Joe had cut his tongue out, but this man was kind of like, if Joe couldn't get people to come into his house to feed on, this man was kind of like his like last resort, or where he would feed on him a little bit. So he's very gangly and very thin. And anyway, this man's name is Patrick Danville, and Roland and Susanna set him free. And it ends up that, and they go walking again, and it ends up that Patrick is an artist, and he can paint pretty well and draw. So he draws some things for Susanna that help her along, and then it happens that Susanna has to leave. Like, Susanna in her mind is thinking, is kind of coming to the conclusion that she cannot go to the Dark Tower. Only Roland can go and see the Dark Tower himself. And so she has Patrick draw her a door, and she goes through it. And it ends up taking her to New York. And so Roland is there with Patrick, and Susanna has told him, only you can go to the Dark Tower, and Roland understands. And so they're very, very close to the Dark Tower, and what they know, they have a hunch that Mordred is following them. And it just happens that Mordred kind of springs on them, I guess. And unfortunately, it's another one where another one of their Katet dies, and this time it's Oi. And that was very sad to read, because Oi basically saved Roland's life by jumping on Mordred and fighting him off. And I think he broke one of like his spider legs, because I believe he was in his spider form. And it was funny, when I always pictured Mordred in my head, I always pictured like a human head with a spider body. It was very strange. I don't know if that was what King pictured or what. But and so Mordred is dead, and so is Oi. And so Roland realizes that he can find the Dark Tower, and that he has found it, and he sends Patrick on his way. Said, thank you so much, but it's now your turn to leave and have your own journey, or your own, adventure type thing. And so Patrick leaves, and Roland is then entered in the Dark Tower. Now, this is funny, because in this book, King is like, this is where the book ends, and then there's a coda. And if you're familiar with the children's book, there's a monster at the end of this book, as told by Grover from Sesame Street. King tells readers that he's like, okay, you can actually stop reading now and think this is where Roland ends, and he finds the Dark Tower, and he's all happy, and, you know, you can stop reading and be fine, and have this happy ending. But if you want to keep reading, you know, I don't urge you to, but here's the end of the story if you want. And kind of similarly to where Grover's like, don't turn the page, there's a monster at the end of the page type thing. So as a happy reader and a constant reader, I read on. And what happens with Roland when he's in the tower is that he sees stairs. And it's like a long set of stairs. Think of like the stairs to like the Sears Tower or something, or, you know, to the Empire State Building or something. And after every 19 stairs, there's a door. And so Roland goes up 19 stairs and he opens the door. And the first door he sees is, I believe, when he was a young man when his mother died. Or something. And then, like, up 19 more stairs, and he's an older boy, maybe a young man, and he realizes this is when his father dies. And so, you know, up more steps, and realizes, again, that this is where he lost another friend. So Roland is realizing that every door that he turns is another part of his history or past that has to do with death. And so he walks all the way up the stairs, not going in many doors, until he gets to the last door. And he opens it up, and when he goes through, he's back in the desert. So you don't know if this is like where he dreamed this all, and he's back. Like, I would think that he's back in the desert in, like, the beginning of book 2. Where is what I imagine. You don't know if he dreamed this whole thing, or now he has to begin his quest over. It doesn't really have a happy ending. Like, if you don't read the coda, then there's the happy ending. But, I liked it. I thought it was an interesting way to end the book. An interesting way to end the series. But I'm very glad that I read the book, and I'm also glad that I'm finished. So the next book that I'm going to review is a book called Unplanned by Abby Johnson. I believe the full title is called The Dramatic True Story of a Former Planned Parenthood's Leader's Eye-Opening Journey Across the Lifeline. So that sounds interesting, and I will bid you a farewell and happy reading.